Tell me about why you think dads need a personal trainer. Well, I think having accountability is just super important. And I think dads who have a very, very high pressure job, or they have a business or whatever it is, they can perform so much better if they do have that accountability. But what is it like in your perspective, Matt?
Well, it's very common in this day and age to outsource things. You know, we get food prepared for us, we get somebody to clean our house, we get a car wash, you know, all these different things. It's just another thing. Like, if you don't know really a vast majority about, you know, physical training and nutrition, which a lot of people don't, then it just becomes an easy way for you to get the results that you really want, but without having to go through the meticulous planning and, you know, looking at things and adjusting stuff. And it just, you can have somebody to teach you.
Tom, welcome to the Big Wakeup podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I've known you for a couple of years now. You've been my personal trainer for a long time. I thought it'd be really great to get you on because so much of the stuff you talk about, I think our parents at home would really benefit from. You work primarily with mostly guys who have been working in their career or their businesses for a very long time, and they seem to all have the same issues coming up all the time. And I know that a lot of parents watching this will actually have experienced those issues. So, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, give us the quick intro to who Tom is.
Right, so I'm Tom Hutchinson-Smith, and I've been a personal trainer now for 14 years. I've worked in London, in Mayfair, and I've moved over to Dubai about 2017. I've been here ever since. I recently set up my own company, specialising in working with CEOs, transforming their bodies and their mindsets from all the sacrifices that they've made through, you know, they're developing their careers, and ultimately, you know, a lot of those tend to be, you know, fathers as well. So obviously that has a very big crossover into today.
Awesome stuff. When you look at the typical client you get in the UK compared to Dubai, are there any obvious differences or not?
Obviously, as you know, the lifestyle here is very different, a lot more convenient. You know, your parameters and your barometers kind of change, really, don't they? You know, in Dubai, like, if anything's more than 15 minutes away, it's oh God, yeah, not going there. You know, miles away. But obviously, as you know, in the UK, like 15 minutes is considered to be quick trips. Obviously, little things like that, you know, obviously change.
So that convenience, everyone's expecting everything to be super convenient.
Yeah,
that trickles through into their lifestyle.
It does. Yeah, a lot of people have, you know, access to a lot more means here in terms of, you know, facilities and gyms and personal trainers and all that type of stuff, more so than the UK. So, if anything, theoretically, it should be a bit easier.
It should be easier.
You know, kind of Deliveroo combats that a little bit, doesn't it? So
with the ease of access to the good stuff, you get ease of access to the...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, obviously temptation sets in and, you know, keeps me in a job, I guess.
So what would you say is if you had to kind of define the most typical client you have, who is it?
It's going to be late 30s to sort of 50-year-old men, primarily entrepreneurs, business owners, either just one singular business or multiple. They've normally got a family of at least, you know, a couple of children. And yeah, that's typically kind of who I work with.
Yeah, all right. So this is what I mean. That exact client description fits so many people who watch this. So, you know, if you're a dad watching this, basically, and you run a business or you've got a stressful career which is super demanding, then this is going to be a really interesting chat, which is going to focus on loads of practical stuff for you. What are their mistakes? What are the mistakes that they currently experience? These typical dads, right?
Well, they always kind of wait for the perfect time, and I'm sure anybody with a family will know that there's lots of things come up all the time, unexpectedly a lot of the time. So, you know, there's never really that perfect time. A lot of people fall into that kind of boom or bust sort of mentality, the 90-day program, you know, and the fact of the matter is that might work for some, but the vast majority in that situation, like, it doesn't necessarily work. You can get derailed quite quickly, and if you don't learn how to pivot around all the various curveballs that having a family and, you know, working full time does, then, you know, you end up kind of going around in a circle and ultimately never getting anywhere.
And what's the result of that? They're putting on more weight, they're more stressed.
Yeah, they become more unhealthy. They have less self-care as time goes on, which ultimately has a knock-on effect to, if you've got a family, then you always try and give them the best version of yourself. But if you don't take care of yourself, then you can't realistically give them the best version of you. And as time goes on, that progressively gets worse and worse from what I've seen.
So it's not just their health that suffers, it's their relationships with the people around them.
Yeah, most definitely. If you're not really looking after yourself whatsoever, your mood changes, sleeping patterns are worse, you don't have the same energy. And obviously, as I'm sure any parent knows, you need an abundance of energy as kids get older, they become more active as well. So, people have to think about what kind of parent they ultimately want to be. Do they want to be the active, very involved dad, or do they want to be the one who's kind of sat on the sidelines, cheering, great, but
not getting involved.
Not getting
something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Are they the ones that want to take them hiking, skiing, all those types of things? Like, I'm very fortunate to have both an active dad and a very active grandfather, so those memories I'll kind of cherish forever, and that's down to the byproduct of them being, quite fit, really. And a lot of people have a misconception that fitness and health and things is all about going to the gym and pumping biceps up, and obviously, trying to go look at it as an aesthetic thing, which, it can be, as we know. But there's more and more to it. Your quality of life and your lifespan, your health span is obviously, a pivotal part of that.
It's really interesting what you said about having an active dad or an active granddad as a role model, right? A lot of people look at fatherhood or motherhood, and I see a lot of people almost using it as an excuse not to be in shape because suddenly their time is split. It's harder to get, to have the energy to do things, harder to have the energy to focus on yourself because you've got to be more selfless, right? You've got to actually look after the people around you. But I mean, I think that part of the responsibility of being a dad is showing your kids how to live a healthy life, right?
Yeah, you're their first teacher, right? And they look to you to be, the foundation, and they learn everything kind of through you. So, your relationship around kind of exercise. This is the thing, is that a lot of people always misinterpret, as you said, the term being in shape. Everybody's got a different version of it, and like a lot of people think, shirts off, six packs, men's health. That's not necessarily being in shape as an active father. It can just be being physically fit and strong enough to run around and wrestle with your sons and daughters, and like I say, be the active dad.
It's one of the conversations you and I have all the time is functional fitness. And what is functional fitness? And when you start going down the rabbit hole of functional fitness, a lot of people get confused, and there's bungees going everywhere, and they're doing acrobatics,
spinning around,
all this sort
flapping
of
about,
and
wood chopping.
But what do you really need? What is functional? So what's your point of view when it comes to functional? Like, where's everyone going? Where do you think everyone's going wrong when they approach the term functional fitness?
Well, I think functional fitness, like as a definition, has obviously great aspirations and it's got good intentions, but it gets kind of lost in translation of trying to become something that's, you don't need to be good at spinning around with something in your hand and balancing on a ball to be functional as a human and as a parent. Ultimately, a lot of people kind of start in their fitness journey and also in the middle of it just want to be able to run around more, pick things up without having a bit of back pain, and picking your child up and wrestling with them and throwing them about, and being able to be super active with them. And that obviously then has nothing to do with quite a lot of things that we see all the time. So ultimately, like, if people become physically fitter, keep their weight and stuff under control, and have a basic baseline of strength and movement, that is going to make you one very, very functional person, for sure.
Whenever I've kind of come to you and said, great to, why don't we try this, or why don't we try that? One of the things you always say to me is, what for? What do you actually want to do that? What do you need to do? And it's like, well, look at your own life with what is functionally your own life? Really, you can scrap a lot of the things that you think you need.
A lot of stuff that we kind of do on a day-to-day basis, like it sounds great and it might be a good idea on paper, but then when you're looking at setting goals and you're breaking down things, there has to be an actual why behind what you do, because otherwise, one, you'll never ultimately achieve it, and as soon as it becomes difficult, you'll kind of sack it off anyway. So when somebody comes to me and they say they want to segue completely into something else, then obviously that's totally fine. It's their body, their goals. But I would ask, like, what do you expect to get out of it, and what do you actually want out of it? So my job is to manage that expectation. And a lot of the time when we go through that backwards and forwards, like with you, you actually go, oh yeah, I don't actually really want that much. You know, it's a bit like, we all want to be millionaires, but we all know what to do, but as soon as it comes to being around, they don't do it. You know, or some of us don't. So, yeah.
It's one of those things as well. I feel like one of the biggest challenges a personal trainer has is their clients come to them with a problem, and they'll start them on a program, but really that client just needs the basics, right? 12 months of the basics: good food, good habits, get your steps, get your water, get your sleep, do the training 3 times a week. But then they get so distracted. Oh, now they need to do this, or they need to do that. They want to do this fasting, or they want to do this exercise or whatever, and that must be a complete constant uphill battle, right?
Yeah, it is, isn't it? For me, obviously, I circle back to the goal. One thing I ask is, like, why will your life be better if you achieve that goal? Once you understand the emotional drivers behind things. Like when I've worked with like parents before, and they obviously have a family element to their goal, it's normally, they want to be more active, or they've found that they weren't able to do some of the things that they thought they might be able to do with their children are really impacting them. So that becomes their why and their incentive. So it circles back to, like, will that new thing help that? If the answer is no, then that means that we either A, have to have 2 goals, or B, one has to be eliminated. And a lot of people that I work with are pretty time poor anyway. So that doesn't mean that they can then double their efforts down in the gym or various other activities to then become good at 2 things. So
I feel like a lot of the time people focus on the 5% of techniques or exercises or fads that sound the most exciting, when really the 95% of the benefit they're going to get from the most mundane, typical, consistent habits, right?
It's not like anything, is it? I'm sure you obviously look at business and it's sort of the same thing as well, right? It's not rocket science. It's the consistency of turning up and obviously doing the stuff really, really well. Obviously, the gym ultimately and the fitness and things like that it is a leisure activity and a hobby for a lot of people, right? So obviously, as with hobbies, it needs to be a little bit interesting for them. So you can see why people kind of make that, decision to try and pick, certain trends and certain things that look interesting. But ultimately, as with anything, it's walking before you run and doing the consistent stuff really, really well, do the basics, and they always deliver. The thing is, it becomes like, once you don't really start to see results and you're not really on the path in the first place, then it's just another thing to try and keep you entertained, to try and keep you on the path. Whereas if you focus on actually getting there, why are you not getting the result in the first place, then that's the thing that will then put you in a straight line, straight towards the end goal.
So we talked about one of the main problems. Give me another massive mistake, I would say, that dads are making.
They don't really think about the kind of longevity aspect when it comes to the health. And when you obviously get older and you want to be, everybody wants to be healthy and wants to be active and things like that, but within every age group, you have to realistically be above average to begin with, to enter that age group to then be, pretty good. So therefore, like, if you've not actually started now, then if you're going into that then next age group, it's just not realistically going to happen. You're actually then going to be behind. So what obviously a lot of people need to do is to think about what kind of lifestyle and what do they want in the future that involves their family as well. Do they want to be inactive and holding obviously their family back, being able to do certain things? And obviously much later down the line, you ask people, do you want to be having your family look after you in your 60s and 70s and 80s like that? And it's also, no, I want to be independent. Or
you're not going on.
We're not really going. Yeah, it's definitely not going to get any easier.
The issues you've got are just going to come down.
Exactly. Yeah. And then it becomes obviously at a certain point extremely difficult to then rekindle that back. I mean, it's never too late, but it's definitely harder.
What are the kind of warning signs that someone would experience to know that they're going down the wrong path? Because a lot of people just might not be aware, right? They just slowly slip into this unhealthy life, and boom, they're just suddenly like, well, 10 years ago I did a little this, or I didn't feel like this, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people it becomes a very gradual process, so therefore you're not necessarily going to notice it if you're not really that looking for it in the first place. So you can see why it does kind of compound over a certain time. But I think like changing your wardrobe quite significantly is normally a sign that, you
can't fit in the trousers.
Yeah, it's not going quite in the right direction. We might need to like have a little bit of a breakdown of what's actually going on. It's not the end of the world if you change your trouser side, but if it's happening quite a few times, then that's definitely a big telltale sign. Trying like any activities. Like I worked with somebody recently, and he went to the X-Strike place over there for a team building.
Oh yeah.
And that was one of the things that got him started, because he said when he went to it, he said he was out of breath like immediately, felt sick.
It's tough though.
And his legs were sore for days, and he was really, really shocked.
It's a great cardio session.
It is. If you're reasonably able in the first place, but obviously, that was a very, very big wake-up call. Something that was supposed to be just a little bit of fun, then became like a real big ask for that person's body.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I say that those two types of things become, telltale signs.
So when it comes to sort of habits, I know you're massive on habits. I think habits are just so fundamental to cracking so many of the goals people have and sticking to something longer term. You've got to understand habits. And I think it's a process, right? So once you understand how to implement a new habit and remove old habits, it's something you can apply whenever you want to learn something new or develop something new. So what's your approach to habits and helping people develop them?
Well, you can't change them all overnight, for a start. That's obviously, people have great intentions of being all right, I'm on it now, which there's only so much of it can actually happen. But it's just starting with basic things that allow you to free up time to then enter new habits. And then it's one of the big things I use is what's called habit stacking, which is combining two things together. So, for example, I always try and get people to increase their like total day activity from like walking and stuff like that. But if you add in 2 hours of aimless walking, just wandering around looking at stuff like, people don't have that time to spare.
And stick to it.
Yeah, exactly. You won't necessarily stick to it. Yeah, because it gets obviously shoved to the back of the priority pile. But if you combine things together, such as like taking phone calls or, reading books and listening to music and, potentially getting your family involved in it and stuff like that, making it to a thing, it makes it a lot more easier for you to be able to stick to it because, you're doubling down on the time and you're combining two things together. So I think that's always, the first thing to realistically start with. And when it comes to habits, it's looking at like the little things compounding over time. If you focus on like the 1% rule, which is, every month or every week or whatever, you're getting 1% better. You've got to look at it as a long-term thing, because a lot of people look at all goals as a very, very short-term thing. But when I've worked with parents and stuff, and yes, they might want to lose 10 kg because it will sort of make them fit or whatever, then that's only the short term. On the long term is obviously then to reap the benefits and the fruits of their labour, to be able to do those things with their family in the long term. And obviously once you start to think about it on a much longer scale like that, and how it can actually improve your life, then those habits just become little chunks that you think, right, this is part of a much bigger thing. And then, it's easier for you to stay on that righteous path then, really.
I've had this thought recently, I suppose in the last 6 months or so, that any new habit I introduce, it's a habit I want to be able to stick to the rest of my life. And I mean, obviously that's like an extreme example, but it just forces you to think long term with things, because if you had to, let's just say you wanted to, one of the habits is walking every morning, right? And you're like, I'm going to stick to that habit the rest of my life. Okay. Well, that's going to have like such a massive positive benefit if you can do that in your 80s. If you do an hour walk right up into your 90s or whatever, hugely beneficial to you. But it's something that if you were going to do that and you suddenly looked at the horizon you've got to develop that habit, you wouldn't just suddenly do, okay, I'm going to do an hour and a half every morning from day one. You do 10 minutes, then 15, then 20, and you'd have this longer term view, right? I think a lot of people don't have a long-term view on their habits and they try and do too much too soon.
Well, the hardest thing when it comes to actually doing something like an hour's walking is just actually the act of going out for a walk, no matter how long it is. That's the hardest part, just saying, yes, I'm going to do it. Once you're actually out there, that's why for a lot of people 10 minutes becomes 20, because once you start to get your stride going, you think, oh, all right, yeah, it's all right now, actually, I'm into it, And you think, oh, actually, well, that's been 20 minutes, I'll just flick around back here and then we're back home, and it obviously just escalates from there. So yeah, the biggest thing is just starting, putting your shoes on, getting out the door. That's, I would say, is the hardest part.
So obviously I walk every day quite early, and often you wake up, I just don't feel like it, and there's that voice in the back of my head which is saying, oh, just don't bother today, or do it later, or whatever. So I kind of have this internal dialogue, right? Don't reply to it. I just sort of say to myself, I'll have that conversation outside once the shoes are on, right? So you're not gonna say yes or no to it. You just basically get the shoes on because that's what you do every day anyway, and it's just such an ingrained thing that you don't allow the negotiation to happen. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at it as a very binary thing. We're either going to do it or we don't. We all have better days than others, and what you'll find is once you've started, you'll either be like, this was an absolute mistake, I feel terrible, I'm even worse now. You can think, okay, I'll go back there. Or you think, well, I'm not amazing, but it might be half the amount of time today. But that half has still become obviously better than zero, and it still keeps that habit. The duration and the quantifications on stuff, obviously, they do help, but if you can keep the act of actually just still doing it and then assessing it once you're actually there, then you're more likely going to keep it up for a lot longer.
What stops people from keeping a habit going? Tell me about friction points, because we've all read Atomic Habits, right? I mean, he talks about removing friction points and trying to make the habit easier to stick to. Tell me about that.
Well, it's just a case of setting yourself up for success is the biggest thing. Like, we'll use the walking as an example because you mentioned it. It's about having kind of your stuff ready in the morning. It's about having a nice little route. It's about having a podcast already downloaded that you're looking forward to listening to, which you're stacking them together. So you're creating that reward system. And the biggest friction point then generally comes down to understanding why you're doing it in the first place, like I talked about earlier. If there's no bigger picture and there's no actual underlying motivator in the first place, it's just a thing that you've done for a little bit. And that's fine. But if you really, really want to keep something up, everybody would like to be in better shape, for sure, if they could at the touch of a button, So it seems one of them cool things to do, and, it's what you should be doing. But do you actually want to do it is a thing, You have to have a deep, hard think about what it is that you actually want longer term and what those emotional drivers are, and another thing that kind of see you through, really.
Tell me about increasing your NEAT. So how can we encourage people to do that?
Well, it's finding activities that incorporate general movement. So obviously, Warrior Academy is obviously a good one, right? Because
it's not good.
It's slightly biased, yeah. Because obviously it's not just like, the sole purpose is to move around sporadically for an hour in here. All right, don't go now. But it's, it's obviously got sole focus and a purpose, right? Which then obviously doubles up, as like it becoming an activity at the same time. So again, you stack in two things together, and that's the same for, for anything really. There's nothing wrong with just going and moving around, but for a lot of people, if you incorporate, it could be a sport, it could be day out with a family and things like that. It could be just meeting a friend and walking and catching up and things like that. Like you see it all the time on Kite Beach, people walking up and down, somewhat aimlessly if you look at it from, afar, but they're talking with their friend or they're on the phone or they're doing something, so you kind of include those two things together and then it makes it much easier.
I kind of look at it a bit like a mindset shift as well. If you had to think to yourself, I want to increase the general movement I do throughout my day. And they say that's one of the biggest contributors to burning calories, right? It's not your workout, it's actually how you use your body throughout the day. And I look at it like everything that we seem to do, especially in Dubai where everything's so easy, is to reduce the amount of effort we need to put in. So you go to a supermarket, you go to Dubai Mall, and you'll park as close to the entrance as possible.
Yeah, somebody's there to carry your bags.
Right, or ballet, or you'll park as close as you can, or you'll go, you'll take the lift. People come to the Warrior Academy, they'll take the lift, they'll queue up for the lift rather than get there quicker by taking the stairs. And one of the things I started doing, it was like years ago now, is look for the longest journey I could take to increase steps anyway, right? And it was, I'd park at the front of the mall where there's no competition for car park spaces, there's 3 spaces back, straight in, easy to park, rather than spending 15 more minutes looking for a spot closer. And then have a 3-minute walk or, all these little things you can do. And it's amazing then, I think if you're a dad and you've got kids, how you then install that in them. If your dad says to you, we always park at the front of the mall where there's loads of space, because no one's going to hit your car, and you get to, walk a little bit before you get there. Whereas if your mindset, your approach to your kids is we need to try and get as close as we can so we don't have to walk. That shift in mindset has such a big impact, I think.
Well, it's true for sure. But when you hear a lot of parents, they say, "Oh, don't do that in front of the kids," or or don't swear in front of them, or don't give them that, because obviously they think of it as being a role model and they'll learn. Well, that is very, very true. But that obviously exceeds outside of all the obvious stuff that in a sort of parenting handbook. Your children's relationship with activity, food, sports, anything like that is all going to stem from your parents.
Yeah.
So if those things become a little bit of a norm, then that will obviously always carry down. A lot of people just think about the kind of character traits of, we always need to be well behaved and polite in front of our children, so they become like that. But obviously there's so much more to it than
what you do, they copy.
It's what they do, and it will have a very, very positive impact. And if you're making exercise a thing and making it fun to some extent, then it's definitely going to be something that they'll carry on for the foreseeable.
Every day before we send the kids to bed or we go to bed, we go on a half-an-hour walk around the compound. And, initially we take pushchairs because they were so young. And we got rid of pushchairs and they couldn't really, it was difficult. But then I'd start carrying them. So then obviously my expenditure was going up because I was carrying 50 kilograms load. And then bit by bit, I'd push it out so they would walk longer and then they could take scooters. And it's amazing how just by kind of implementing that before they go to bed, they were sleeping better. I was sleeping better, right? You're spending more time together as a family. And I think those little habits, the routines as a parent you can implement benefit not just you, but your kids as well.
Well, I think with that being said, we live in an age of distraction and technology and things like that, and which, are all good up to a certain extent, but obviously it's very easy to lose that connection with just being with each other, and just to enjoy something simple like that and to not be distracted and to talk about the day and to talk about school and all those little things. And it's very easy in this day and age to kind of forget about that, I think. Yeah. So little things like that do definitely help. And the less, also from a technical perspective, the less blue light exposure will obviously make anybody sleep better.
It's interesting as well what you said about stacking habits, doing two things together. And I'm trying to draw parallels between parenting and doing that, trying to increase your expenditure of calories and your increasing movement, but also spending time with your kids. And yesterday I was at the park with my son, and there were other parents around, all sitting there on their phones, right? Yeah. No one's playing with the kids. So I was up chasing my son around, trying to teach him how to climb monkey bars and do all this sort of stuff. Probably a couple of years ago I wouldn't be doing that because I wouldn't be as conscious about it. I'd probably be on my phone, but now I'm so conscious about it. And before I knew it, I have 5 kids. I'm now chasing me around the park.
Yeah.
The dads would look, or the mums would look up at me like, what's going on here?
Who's this guy?
Just started a War Academy club in the park. But it's amazing how, we don't capitalize on those moments where not only would we improve our own life by being more active and, burning more calories, but we would actually spend more quality time with our kids, right? If you said to your kids, I'm going to spend 15 minutes every day with you at the park and I'm going to be as active as I can, it's 2 birds well said, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah, like I say, it's very easy to forget about those simple things in life. We've all got stuff on and we're all connected, obviously, all the time, aren't we? And we look at those little moments and think, oh, yes, I can respond to that email now and, I can make that phone call or do that thing. But obviously that can then detract from, the whole purpose of you being there in the first place. This is obviously to go to the park and have some fun. So,
tell me about why you think dads need a personal trainer. Well, I think having accountability is just super important. And I think dads who have a very, very high pressure job or they have a business or whatever it is, they can perform so much better if they do have that accountability. But what is it like from your perspective, Matt?
Well, it's very common in this day and age to outsource things. We get food prepared for us, we get somebody to clean our house, we get a car wash, all these different things. It's just another thing. Like if you don't know really a vast majority about, physical training and nutrition, which a lot of people don't, then it just becomes an easy way for you to get the results that you really want, but without having to go through the meticulous planning and, looking at things and adjusting stuff. And then just, you can have somebody to teach you how it fits around you and your lifestyle, so that would be the biggest thing. And the reason why a lot of people don't start doing much training in the first place is because they think about the time perspective. Well, having that person will then save you time and also help you get the result as well in the first place. So if you're going about it on your own, then obviously it's arguably going to take you longer, and then you might not even get there anyway. So all fitness and all goals and anything in life all exists around motivation, right? So there's only so much of that every single person has. Like, we're not going to be motivated to see absolutely no return on our efforts for the foreseeable future. Maybe it'll happen one day. Well, after a few weeks, you'll be like, what's a waste of time? And those few hours that I managed to carve in at great expense are now absolutely redundant. So
I feel like a lot of people have a strange way of looking at personal training as well. Like, they don't necessarily see it as an education. I really see that the investment you put in to a good PT who understands what they're doing and educates you while they're doing it. If you, like me, ask loads of questions, then you pick up a lot of stuff. So you're getting someone who's teaching you how to implement this stuff for the rest of your life. Right?
Yeah, coaching somebody is to teach them. That's what I kind of see myself as. And one big thing I'd always do with a lot of people is try and push to build them a kind of sense of autonomy about it. Because having a personal trainer is great and it's a luxury. It's a nice thing, but if you can't stand on your own 2 feet without them, then obviously you're not really being coached, are you? You're not really learning the skills. And the people who get good results and sustain them, most importantly, are the ones who are able to go on holiday and do a little bit of training on their own, or they're able to do some things outside. They're able to, figure out what their preferences and how much food and stuff that they need on their own. And then they're able to, keep it up, and it's much less demanding for them.
Tell me the three best habits that a dad watching this today could implement this week, stick to for the next 20 years, that would change his life, that you would prioritize as the top three.
Put me on the spot, man. So I think
subscribing to this podcast.
Yeah, subscribe to this podcast being number one. No. So number one, I would say, is to get moving around a lot more. Walking is a very, very easy one to do, and it seems very arbitrary, it's very popular, but if you're a father and obviously you've got a career and things like that, then obviously there's going to be not much time for yourself across the week. So self-care is a very, very important thing, like we spoke about. You need to be able to give your best version of yourself to your family and to the people around you that depend on you. So, walking can be a very, very easy one. It's free. It's easy to do. It doesn't matter what your fitness level is. Doesn't matter where you do it. You can just walk outside, walk on a treadmill. You could do it a couple of times a day, 3 times a day. It doesn't really matter. That's probably the biggest thing, and that will carry you through life forever. Like, if you think about the most active, old person that, 80, 90 years old, what's the one thing they all have in common? They're all moving around a lot more. And a lot of it comes from walking, a little bit of gardening there. They're not in the gym necessarily pumping weights, but they're going to be moving around a hell of a lot more, going to the shops, carrying their own shopping, things like that, you see. And that's basic form of exercise that will carry you through forever.
Yeah. It's one of those, if you look at the blue zones, I think it's called blue zones, the places where they live the longest, right?
Yeah.
It's like they're moving the most, they're socializing the most. I can't remember what the third one was, but either way, I think if you can somehow harvest out those two things together, find yourself in a very active environment where you socialize with lots of people, or you just build movement into your day-to-day life and meeting people and having conversations. And then they don't even need to be deep conversations. One of the documentary I was watching on it was like, even just meeting someone at a shop, you see, at the shops, having conversations, yeah. It's really interesting that if you look at longevity, which this is what we're talking about, right? Health way into the future. Those are the 80 to 90-year-olds, because I've got family who lives in their 90s, and the Danes jumping into the sea, where they cut the ice open and jump in.
Yeah, exactly.
They find their way to meet people and socialize and be active, right? And it's amazing how long their mind stays young because of the way they approach movement.
Yeah, your mind is in some ways a muscle that has to be flexed and exercised just like any of the other ones. So I think the second thing ultimately will be, in terms of nutrition, would be to kind of take a bit of responsibility in learning how to cook and also learn some form of portion control. You know, we live obviously in days where everything's accessible, you're constantly gorging, and that's a very, very easy way to gain weight, and that then spirals into obviously all the big health problems that we kind of see today. So I think not eating until you're completely full, ready to burst is a really, really good one, and actually thinking about, do I need to eat, you know, and just like that. So you eat 2-3 times a day, and then make that obviously part of that cooking your food as part of the, you know, daily routine and stuff like that. So that way you're probably not going to gain as much weight you know, over a long period of time, because as soon as you do start to significantly gain body fat, then from a health perspective, you know, all the markers go up. So,
and of course those issues just compound, don't they? Especially as you get older, without even realizing it.
yeah.
So what's the if you had to give 5 tips on nutrition that people can easily implement, what would you say? One of the weirdest things I would say is like eat the same thing every day.
Well,
I mean, you know, have something different in the evening, but just have a set plan, just stick to it.
kind of, yeah. It's not really that simple for a lot of people. You know, variety is the spice of life, as they say, and a lot of people will want to change things quite a lot.
But too much variety gets you in trouble, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's a sweet spot, I guess. You know, not so sweet spot. So, yeah, I think it's ultimately understanding like how much calories that you actually need on a day-to-day basis and what that looks like in terms of actual food. You know, because a lot of people that I've worked with, for example, don't understand that oil is pure fat, and then fat has 9, you know, calories per gram in it, and that, you know, 1 tablespoon can actually then add a massive amount across the day. So it's being aware of that. And the biggest problem I have when I start working with someone is underreporting, because they're not even aware of a lot of the things that they do. So it's gaining a good understanding of, you know, what probably for a lot of people a couple of 1,000 calories looks like across the day, and how they can break that up over the meals and developing their preferences around it, and then just being consistent with their eating patterns. You know, the whole skipping breakfast one day and then eating at 3 p.m. and then having a few lattes.
Intermittent fasting.
Well,
Skip your breakfast.
You can call it that. I mean, you can intermittent fast for sure, but it doesn't really work if you're going to do it one day, not the other, and then you have a massive dinner one night. You eat really like it just, your energy levels fluctuate, your appetite fluctuates. It just becomes, you know, a lot more out of sync, and it's just a lot more difficult to kind of stay in tune with it. So keep the consistent eating patterns, and, you know, understand roughly, you know, what a day's food is going to look like for you.
I guess that's an interesting one as well, to be aware of some things that are kind of sneaky to be aware of.
Cheeky latte. yeah, slips in there.
Oil is one of the biggest ones, I think. People just don't realize just how many calories are in oil. And so what else can you think of? I mean, your latte at Starbucks is probably going to be several hundred calories, right?
Yeah, that's going to be your first one. Obviously, it's going to be sugars in beverages such as, like, you know, Coca-Cola, for example. If you have a couple of cans of that a day, which might be considered a drink and a refreshing beverage, obviously then adds quite a significant amount. Alcohol is obviously a very, very big one. You know, nobody ever really has just one drink, do they? So if you're adding a few of those in, and they can be kind of considered social, like if you're just having a couple of glasses of wine every night, well, over the course of a week, it's obviously quite a significant change, isn't it? So they're the kind of top culprits, really.
Alcohol, sugar, and oil.
Yeah,
those are the three sneaky ones.
Three sneaky ones.
They'll get you.
They'll slide under the radar, they will.
But it's also the decisions people make once they have had a couple of drinks, isn't it?
Yeah, you're in
you have a couple of drinks, and suddenly you're like, oh, I can actually, you know, I can have that dessert, or I can have that, you know, they want something salty, which typically isn't going to be healthy when you're out about.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Inhibitions get obviously lowered, and then it kind of compounds from there, for sure.
So just not putting yourself in a position where you're more likely to make a bad decision, right?
Yeah, set yourself up for success. If you're going out for a meal, don't leave yourself like 5+ hours of not eating, because you'll be starving, obviously, when you go in. Therefore, you're going to eat more. You know, if you're going to have alcohol, then make sure that they're not really all stacked together in a very, very short space of time. You know, spread them out with Monoviso mineral water.
Sponsored by.
Yeah. Stuff like that, or just space them out in general, and therefore, you're not going to be as intoxicated, I guess, as obviously, and then make poor decisions.
You've been a personal trainer for how many years?
14.
14 years. What's been your biggest success story? Or something that really, when you look back at your career and you worked in some of the top gyms in London, Mayfair, and Dubai, and you've been the trainer to trainers, so you've obviously not just dealt with your own clients, but other people's clients and how they can mentor their own clients through certain things. What's been the biggest success story that you've experienced that you've been responsible for?
Well, there's around here.
Should I have sent you these questions before then? Would that be easier?
Nah, it's going to be a bit cheesy if I say yours, isn't it? Cut that one out.
Prize pig.
Prize pig, yeah. Yeah, the prize pig.
What's a story where you look back and you think, I've really changed that person's life,
I think it was really funnily enough, one of the first, very, very first people I worked with, there was a guy called Aaron, and he springs to mind straight away because he was quite a young man who was the similar age to me at the time, but his body was considerably older. He was part of a family that had a lot of businesses, and he was really successful, quite a very, very young age, really. And it seemed a bit strange to me. I was thinking, well, he's been working like a dog for years when we were only probably about 20.
Took his toll as well.
Yeah, it took his soul big time. So his confidence was very, very, very low. He was never really had any kind of significant other at the time, and he wouldn't go on holidays and take his shirt off or anything like that, which is a pretty bad place to be honest, when you're
20s or 30s?
Yeah, 20 years old. You want to be going on holiday with your friends and jumping in the pool and and going getting up to no good for sure, but he wasn't really able to do any of those things. And for me at the time, I was like, well, this is a really, really bad place to be. I'd never really met anybody like that before. And once we'd done our work together, it was like completely parallel change. Honestly, confidence increased to the point where he'd met a woman, and they're actually now married.
Oh, really?
So off the back of that, yeah. And we always joked about it initially that, it's going well, it's all going too kind. And then, they are married and they have children together.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
And it was seeing him, kind of go through that transition and going on holidays and stuff like that. He said, and taking his shirt off and really enjoying himself, and
just
not in a showing off kind of way, but just obviously you don't want to go in the pool in your clothes, do you? So he would literally, he said to me I literally will keep a jumper on when I'm on a summer holiday. I mean?
Being uncomfortable.
Being that uncomfortable in your own skin, people always think about it as just being kind of not really into my image. But if you think about that, how it cascades into all other facets of your life, what I mean? It's quite a big thing, really. So I think that's probably, ironically, being the first one as well. I think it was the first client I had, and it was the first sort of big change. And I think we lost about 20 kilos or so at the time, which was a massive life change from there.
I suppose that inspired you then to continue that and to work with more people, right? You've seen what you can do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's nice, obviously, build someone's biceps and increase the bench press, things like that, which, are all good and interesting. But obviously when you see it, cascade outside of the gym to, all the facets of the life, then, that is really, really rewarding for me.
What's coming out? What are you up to next?
Well, this is kind of the first full year of me working in my business, and I'm looking at creating a lot of online programs and digital assets around that, and I'm quite new to the kind of content creation game, so I learned all that at the same time and just put in all my knowledge that because I was used to be super against kind of social media and standing there and talking on camera and things.
Now look at you. God.
Ironically, we're sat on 3 cameras right now, yeah. So... Yeah, but obviously, I think about it, I've got a lot of information and knowledge to offer people, and I've helped a lot of people. And I want to change a lot more lives and work with a lot more people, and I'm going to put that out there to the world, and so people can digest it.
Awesome. Before we finish up, if you had to give one piece of advice to a dad who's stressed, they've got a young family, they are working long hours, they're seeing their body deteriorate. their energy is low. If you had to give them just one piece of advice, what would you give? What would you say?
Start doing some vigorous, intense exercise, which at the time will probably be quite horrific for the first few times. But once you really obviously increase your cardiovascular output and your endurance and your strength like that, that has profound effects on your energy, your confidence, your sleep, mood, everything. So if you can, 2 to 3 hours of fairly intense resistance training will be very, very beneficial. You can include a little bit of cardiovascular sort of stuff in there as well. And if you can carve that out, even if you do it from home, you'll notice a big difference over time.
That's probably one of the biggest misconceptions, right? I've got no energy to train. They don't realize
train energy.
You're going to get more energy.
Yeah, I mean, there's that initial kind of cross bridge of like the first few weeks, you still got no more energy, So that's where obviously the kind of delayed gratification comes in, and that's where a lot of people drop off. But if you can, sort of stick with it for a month or so, you're going to start to see like some really, really good effects, and you'll start to see what it's all about. Then that's where they normally say you get bitten by the bug, as they say.
So then you're hooked.
Then you're in.
Bitten by the bug or the bug.
Bug.
And where can everyone find you? Website?
So straightlinept.ae. I'm on Instagram as well mostly, which is straightline_PT. Same for TikTok if you're into that. Yeah.
You are. I've seen all your dances on TikTok.
Yeah. You can be on.
You can watch all Tom's dances on TikTok.
Yeah. Embarrassing.
Since he's getting into social media, he's really been putting the hours away on TikTok.
Yeah, finding my rhythm.
Mate, thank you for joining. I really hope you enjoyed today's Warrior Academy podcast episode. We're going to keep creating these episodes because I know that so many parents find them useful or get insights or get ideas about how to develop their child's character. But it all comes down to the 3 C's: confidence, conduct, and concentration. So if you want to get a deep insight into the levels of confidence your child has, the level of concentration they have, or the level of conduct they have, so that you can actually put a score next to it and then work towards increasing those scores like we do in the Warrior Academy, then I'd love to invite you to fill in the breakthrough area assessment. It takes about 5 minutes of your time, and you will get a personalized PDF report on your child's 3 C's. To access the breakthrough area assessment and find out your child's 3 C's score, all you need to do is go to www.breakthrougharea.com.